there's always going to be the structure. There's always going to be another wave. There's always going to be another swell. And then the flow is where you are in the moment. What's the dance you want to do with it today in this moment?
The cult of achievement. What is it? What does that even mean? I mean, if you've just been called to listen to this episode because of the title, The Cult of Achievement, I think you might have a suspicion of what that's about. In today's episode, we're speaking to Tutti Taygerly. She's an author and coach, executive coach, and she wrote the book called Make Space to Lead. And in this episode, she shares with us her impression of what the cult of achievement is. She talks a little bit about Tiger Moms. She also talks about Silicon Valley and this cult of driving to achieve for achievement's sake. She also tells us how she views it from a surfing standpoint in terms of how to find that inner fulfillment that seems to be missing from constantly moving the goalpost of achievement forward and forward and forward in life and never feeling that inner fulfillment. Powerful episode, especially if you are someone who very much like Tutti, like myself, have found yourself just striving for achievement's sake. And in this episode, she shares with us her philosophy and 2 very specific and intentional practices that can help you to find that flow of life and step outside of the busyness. Perfect episode for this time during this busy season when all we can see is action and to-dos. So join me in welcoming Tutti Taygerly. Hello and welcome to the Business of Happiness podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Tarryn MacCarthy, and today is going to be a great day because we have with us coach and author Tutti Taygerly. Hello, Tutti. Welcome.
Hi, Taryn. Thanks so much for having me on here. Excited to play.
Oh, I'm so excited. I was so excited to invite you onto the podcast when your book was introduced to me called Make Space to Lead. And I looked into a little bit about you and I went to your website and I found out so much incredible information about your story and about what led you to coaching. And I think so many of my listeners are going to be able to relate to you because it seems to me that you have a history of seeking high achievement, pushing, trying to create the very best out of yourself, valedictorian at Stanford gives us enough information just right there. But tell us a little bit about your journey of this high achieving personality and what your impetus used to be and what it is now.
Yeah, thanks so much for bringing that up. And I have to say, the valedictorian at Stanford, if we're going to be like open into making mistakes, that was actually a miswrite by one of my marketing folks. So high school valedictorian, definitely not that at Stanford. Like that would have been like, oh my gosh, amazing achievement. So little correction. I know it was out for a little bit on my website, but it's since been corrected by some of the folks.
There you go. Well, thank you for your honesty about that. But it still speaks to us about how much intensity was behind your drive to achieve.
Yes. And, part of it, I'm Asian, I'm Thai Chinese, and I had a very, very intense mom. We talk a lot about this notion of a tiger mom. There's been literature written about it and just this like study, achieve, honor your ancestors, make your parents proud. And that was drilled into me since I was a little girl. That was my value and my worth to keep achieving. And that's how I lived most of my life. That was what drove me to get the good grades. There would be like I'd come home with an A minus. And it'd be, why is there a minus? If there's going to be something by the A, it better be a plus. That would be the immediate feedback. And that's what really drove a lot of my values, from getting into the Ivies, from attending Stanford. And then after that, hopping from job to job, climbing that career ladder. Got to be, what's the next title? How many levels closer to the CEO can I get? How big is my team? It was almost just this voracious appetite of how much more can I achieve? Just like this hungry ghost that's never full to keep grasping and seeking more. And that was what I did. And that's how I lived a lot of my life and career.
And, it's interesting to hear you say this and attribute some of those values instilled in you from your mom. And here you are as a mom.
Mm-hmm.
Now you mom to two teenagers, or soon to be a teenager and a
Yep.
teenager. And do you think that the times are any different, or do you just see it differently now that you've gone through this experience?
Wow, isn't that the most brilliant question? It's always like, which one is it? And it's always, I think, it's got to be both.
Yeah.
I think that our times are very different.
Mm-hmm.
Having daughters educated in the public school system, in the charter school system of San Francisco. Let's just call it California, as extreme as maybe you can get for all the stereotypes and biases we think about it. But my daughter came home from school the other day and she said, "Mama, every single class I'm in, we're talking about social justice in some way." And I was like, huh, yeah, that's kind of cool. And then we went on to have a particular conversation about it. But the thing that's really interesting, because so much of it is not just what you say, but what you model. Both of my daughters are straight A students. And it's never been like I would never have said those words that my mother said to them. And it's never been really an explicit, you must make good grades. There's always the talk of like balance, and it's important to keep your body healthy. It's important to do soccer. It's important to give back. One of my youngest daughter and I spent a lot of our day yesterday helping with a community art project. Like all of these things are important, but yet somehow I'm sure they picked up a lot of the drive from me, whether or not I feel like I'm implicitly emphasizing it. So it's a really good question. I mean, wish I could know. We can't completely A/B test it. So I'm sure it's both.
It's so interesting. I know my listeners are listening to you and thinking, oh, here you are, Tutti. You've done such amazing things. You were a high achiever. You pushed yourself, you strove, and now you have two beautiful girls. They're doing the same thing. What's wrong with this? What's wrong with this picture? Why are we even talking about this today? So, what happened to you, and what were your realizations along the way that made you question, or at least reinvestigate your drive?
Yeah, and I'm really glad that you brought that up, Taryn, because, as you know, I worked at Facebook for 4.5 years, and it's so nice and easy for us to fall into this sanitized version of our life, right? The stuff that we're grateful for, the stuff that we kind of want to brag about, the stuff that we're proud of. Like that's just so easy to produce that sanitized view. And then the reality thing is, I think it's both. From a mindset, yes, wonderful to really talk about what you're appreciative of, great and grateful for. And so much of this realization for me came out of the worst year of my life. Just like three, I'd say, crises that were the worst year of my life. There was about 3 or 4 years ago. And in the space of a year, I feel my entire life came crumbling down. And the three things that happened was first, my father-in-law passed, and I'd known him since I was 18. So he felt like he was my American father without any of the teen or, pressures or all that coming up. And shortly after that, my kid's dad and I decided to separate and then divorce. Again, I'd been with him since I was 18. That's like a lifetime. And at that point, our kids were both in elementary school and we never fought in front of them. So this was a complete, I mean, we'd never fought either. So that was a complete just shattering of their world. And then the last thing, in that same year, my father passed. My whole family lives in Thailand. I'm over here in the United States. And it was, yeah, all three of these really caused me to question, what was this that I was doing? How was I working and had been working 50, 60, 70-hour weeks since I started working? how was I able to take this 3-hour commute at that time from my house in San Francisco to the Facebook offices in Menlo Park? What did it feel like? Even a year before, I'd been talking to one of my own coaches, and I was like, everything feels perfect. I'm married to my college sweetheart. I've achieved the promotions and all the things that I wanted. I have 2 beautiful girls. I'm like, and something's off. So I wrap up that answer. It's just it's everything all together. And those were the 3 things that really triggered me to go deeper into personal growth, examine what it was that I wanted to be doing, trigger this career switch. And I would say, in a way, even though I'm having a really hard time with my 13-year-old daughter, become a different type of mother that's a little bit more empathetic and understanding, and re-examine the relationship with my mother. All of those.
Yeah. Wow. It's really interesting to hear you say that those aspects, those changes in your life made you question parenting, made you question your identity as a mother and also your identity as a worker, as an achiever. What is your perception of this cult of achievement, as you call it? You call it this cult of achievement. So how is this cult of achievement and the way you speak about it in your book is from a very negative perspective. So how does that negatively impact those parts of you that you love so much, the parenting part? Where is that difficulty? The cult of achievement could be of anything. It could be achieving a family, achieving relationships. So how is the cult of achievement damaging in those regards?
Yeah. I think there can be a period of time when we are so caught up in achieving for achievement's sake that we almost become mindless zombies pursuing it without caring about anything else or even thinking about what it is that we want about it. I've worked with so many people who have had a single-minded goal: promotion, hit that baseline number, report to the CEO, take their first company public, take a company public, whatever it is. And these are great. I don't want to knock that. Achieving, making impact in the world, doing the work that you love, all of these are fantastic. And it can become a little bit hollow when you're in that zombie mode and single-mindedly, that's all that matters at the expense of everything else. Because a lot of what I ask people to think about is, hey, imagine you got that thing. You got that promotion, you launched that book, you took your company public. What does it feel like the next day? And all too often, what hyperly focused people stuck in the cult of achievement, and I count myself as into that in moments too, is that the next day you're like, oh, okay, done that. What's the next thing? So you keep moving the goalposts and goalposts and goalposts without pausing to think a little bit about contentment, about happiness, about celebration. And so the cult to me is when you're single-mindedly locked into that zombie mode, when you're just driven by your calendar and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing without some type of balance. Achieving is great. It's good. It's a huge sense of validation and confidence and seeing what other people think of you. But to what extreme? When does it become culty versus a really healthy, wonderful thing to have?
Yeah, and you hit on it perfectly there in that it's just for achievement's sake. Just to get that external validation or get that check that box of accomplishment.
Like the gold star. That's my metaphor from like kindergarten. Bing, 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 bing. Okay, you got that,
Yeah. And it's such a great feeling when you get those little hits. But it's great in the moment. And then as you mentioned, it's very defeating the next moment.
Yeah, exactly.
So do you have a practice yourself that you now have integrated into your own life that helps you avoid that? Because I know once an achiever, forever achiever, right? You're that never leaves you completely. You always have that little rush that you get, especially when you're perhaps even on a smaller scale, a multitasker, somebody who loves to just
Mm-hmm.
get a lot done, even if achieving just for the day feels really good and you try to check off all those boxes. So
Yeah,
do you have a practice that reminds you to step outside of that?
I do. I have a philosophy and then two practices.
Hmm.
So the philosophy that I have around this is well, in the book I talk about the acronym SURF, SURF, but it's the last one that I want to focus on, the F. Because the philosophy that I have around this, F stands for force and flow. So the philosophy I have around achieving and practices to get out of the cult of it is that structures, goals, visions of the life you want to create, these are all good. This is the force, this is the drive, life force, if you will, that has you keep going towards that. And then the flow is being able to be in the moment, being able to have the intuition of like, okay, this is what's giving me energy. And today, I don't want to do those things to get me towards my goal. And maybe that's okay. Maybe I am going to follow the energy and figure out that, hey, maybe what I need today is take a 2 hour walk, to go and take a long lunch break with a friend or a long coffee break with a friend. And flow is the ability to change your mind. So the force is, yeah, have that vision, have that 5 year, I don't know, 1, 3, 5 year, but know why behind it. Know the why and keep in contact with the why, and then let yourself flow in between it. Yeah. And I get that analogy from surfing. There's always going to be the structure. There's always going to be another wave. There's always going to be another swell. And then the flow is where you are in the moment. What's the dance you want to do with it today in this moment? So that's not exactly a practice, but that's the philosophy to balance both. And I'll pause for a minute, see if you want me to go into more practices or if you want to take this somewhere else.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. There's so much embedded in that because in the flow, and tell me if you agree with this, Tutti, is that many high achievers have done so because they knew what they were going after and then just tell me what to do, show me what to do, and I'll get it done. Right. You
Mm-hmm.
hear a lot of this. I can outwork anyone in the room.
Mm-hmm.
If I put my mind to it, I'll make it happen. Yeah.
Yep.
Those of you who
Yep.
didn't see
Very
Tutti just
familiar.
raise your hand. But the big
Guilty.
it's a superpower, I'll tell you.
It
Um,
is.
but the flow aspect of it, that relies a lot on self-worth. It's almost like the force part of it is a lot of self-belief. I can do it.
Mm-hmm.
I can get it done. Just tell me what to do. Even if you tell me I can't, I can make it happen. But the flow part relies a lot on self-worth in terms of, can I trust myself? If you're listening to this podcast, chances are you didn't get into business to be miserable. The problem is that people feel that if their business gets busier, if they start becoming more successful, that happiness will eventually set in. But it can actually get worse. This is why I created the Business of Happiness Prosperity Coaching. In this one-on-one coaching, we look at how to redefine success on your terms and re-find the joy and the passion in your dream. Visit me at thebizofhappiness.com and become the happiest business owner you know.
Yeah.
Can I trust myself to take that 2-hour break today or cheat on my nutritional goals or, make a little left turn when I know I should be making a hard right?
Yeah.
And so do you find that that flow part of it is what a lot of your clients have challenges with?
Absolutely.
Hmm.
And Tarryn, thank you so much for defining self-worth. Because part of it, I was like, yeah, I'm not sure. But then when you talked about it being the ability to trust yourself, bang, you nailed it. Mm-hmm. That I completely agree with. And that, this is the power of words. Self-worth could mean one thing to someone else, but like the ability to trust yourself, yes. And yeah, most of the clients I work with are high achievers in some way. I work with a lot of people in tech, whether it's executives at all the big name tech companies or startup co-founders and CEOs who are striking it out on their own in a more entrepreneurial fashion. And in the corporate world, in the tech world, in, I dare say people have said to me, like the American culture, maybe the Western culture, we are rewarded for achieving. We're rewarded for the doing. It's maybe that's the capitalist society. I don't know. It's the easier thing to say. You made this amount of money, you had this title. I'd say it's not a bad thing. It's the easier surface level way to say, all right, that's the gold star.
Mm.
And I've also worked with I worked with an entrepreneur who was on his third company. Huge, wonderful, successful exits. Part of the question was, hey, is this all? Is this it? And so I love, I mean, just even seeing behind you the business of happiness, because the business part, that was great. He'd gotten all of that. But it was that flow, it was that contentment, it was that happiness, it was that following the energy that he was missing. And I think it's the flip and the balance between them, because you need them both. There's going to be moments in time where you're motivated, you just got maybe some devastating news, or maybe performance review feedback that you didn't want, and that's going to be, or an investor pulled out, and there are going to be devastating parts. And I think it is this flow that helps see you through.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, okay, that's a setback. How do I follow the energy? How do I follow the inevitability of, yep, it's a mistake. All right. How do I continue through this?
I love the analogy of the surfing too, because just picturing a surfer as you're speaking, not being a surfer myself, but imagining the highs and the lows, it's almost like you can't get to those highs again if you don't go down into the base of that low to be able to appreciate the high again, which is another beautiful way of looking at it, that there really is so much strength to be gained from it. And of course, people talk about the lessons in failure and the learning from failure, but that beautiful image that you paint for us in terms of following and flowing with the waves really shows you that we have more power and to be able to do so in ourselves than we realize. It seems like things happening from outside of us that happen to us, but really there's so much advantage and strength in looking at it more in that cyclical fashion.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Tarryn, can I push a little bit on the surfing stuff?
Yeah, please.
I think most people, when they think about surfing, and maybe it became more popular after the Summer Olympics to be actually to see some of the competitors up and riding, the image is like, oh, strong, amazing, badass person up on the wave, like riding it and carving and going down the line. But the reality is, if I'm out for an hour and a half, 2 hour surfing session, I probably spend 3 to 5 seconds up and riding the wave. And most people don't realize that, because that's the view that you see. And that's what you see like on videos and highlight reels. And what you spend most of the time doing is the majority of time is paddling, paddling, paddling. So like putting in the work, the force to build up your muscles, to get yourself in position, to get yourself where you need to go. And then you spend a lot of time waiting. You're sitting there, you're feeling the bob of the ocean, you're looking out on the horizon to be like, okay, where's the next set? Where's it coming in? Which wave do I want to pick in the set? And then that like 3 to 5 seconds. And of course, I'm not the best surfer. I'm sure the ratio is different for better surfers, but it's the point I think still holds, that the flow is not just being in up and riding. It's also being in the waiting, and it's also being in putting in the reps to practice and paddle. And I just wanted to share that analogy, because so many people have that vision, like this picture behind me of you're up on the board and riding.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. That really is a beautiful way to look at it. So, how do you teach these high achievers, go-getters, this idea of flow? now we're back to the practices, I guess.
Now we're back to the practices.
What practices do you suggest or offer to any listeners who are recognizing this in themselves and are saying, yep, this is me. I just go for the achievement all the time. And it's very unfulfilling.
So I think there's two specific practices. One is maybe more internally driven, and then the second is much more about the team and the people around you. And they're both together. So the first one is about celebrations, calling out a celebration practice. And this is something that I try to do weekly. Sometimes fail, but try to do weekly. And what I have a lot of my clients do when I start when I start all of my coaching calls, the first question that I ask is, what do you have to celebrate since we last met? Because so often high achievers, have you ever gotten like a performance review and you're like, okay, page 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, whatever. I know what I'm doing well.
Yeah.
Where is the feedback? Where do I grow? Where do I change? That's high achievers. And one of the things that I do is slow them down to be like, what do you have to celebrate? And I want to be very specific about this. Doing this every week means that you're not celebrating. Well, you're not only celebrating that huge launch you've been working towards for 5 months. If you're doing this every week, you're also celebrating that as a leader, you made the decision to let go, a hard decision to let go of an employee. You're celebrating the way you did it. You're celebrating a learning, an insight that you had from doing it. You're celebrating that you took a 2-hour lunch break. There's lots of little things to celebrate, and it's building up that muscle. It could be eye rolling. You're like, really? We're going through this again? But it's a practice, it's a repetition, it's a muscle to remind ourselves that, yeah, this is the stuff that you did well, because that is the number one thing that high achievers forget.
And there's that building of that self-worth that we were talking about.
Yep,
starting
exactly.
to appreciate and trust yourself. You can do these things.
Yeah, because for me, a lot of the questions that I ask, when something really great happened, you're like, okay, they acknowledge that it was great. They acknowledge like that. What is it about the thing that you were proud of? What is it that you want to celebrate? And it's just asking those questions and going into the layers. And what I love about this celebration practice and ritual is that many of the people I work with extend it to their teams, to their company, to have this. If you have a weekly meeting with your team, your exec team, or the people you manage, or an all hands meeting, it's like, how do you start to build this culture into it? Many people in tech have a culture of it's okay to make mistakes. We're going to learn, fail fast and learn, which is great because that helps us build great things. But what parts about this are you also celebrating? So that's one of it that starts with celebration. And I think it's also linked to things that we've seen in many years in research around meditation, around having a gratitude practice. That can be a little too crunchy for some people, a little too woo-woo, but celebration. Start with the work wins. Maybe it extends beyond the work wins.
And then what's your second practice?
The second practice, and this is what I fundamentally believe really drives the flow and the energy between people and is one of the secrets of happiness, is that it's about relationships. If you think about work fulfillment, if you think about like the joy, the energy, the celebrations, it's often built on relationships. What is that trusted relationship with your boss? What are the things that you've managed to accomplish together with your peers across functions, across different disciplines? And then what is this value system and way of working together that you establish for your team? So a lot of it is thinking back and always being mindful of how much of your work is transactional leadership. Just getting that shit done, getting that launch out, just getting go, because you got a really big to-do list and it's boom, 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 going through that. How much of the day do you spend connecting to people, building trust, building influence, understanding a little bit more about what's going on with them, using that curiosity, that magical power of curiosity to be like, hey, what's happening? Because I think that it's about building the relationships and always starting with people first, people before the ideas, people before the product, people before the launches. And that's what we so often forget because there is no checkbox or goal that says be nice to people. That's the two, the celebrations and the ultimately it's the flow is always about the relationships.
It's great to take those two practices also into family life. Going back to what we started talking about in this conversation, being a mom, and remembering, both of those can so beautifully be interpreted in personal and family life as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think about that all the time. One of my core values is family. And I think that only really hit with me when I became a mom. Never had that as a core value before, being a mom can change you. But I also take it into, what is that sense of family? Like, how is my team my family? And of course, it's different because ultimately working for a corporation is a handshake. You provide value for the business and they provide money, employment. But I think even beyond that, when you have a relationship with your team and your people, it goes beyond that one company. It's the sense of family for me is caring about an individual on your team so much that you're building that relationship with them beyond that one company. And they can still be family and you can let them go in a way that's respectful and honest when it's like, okay, the skills that you bring in, the way that you're working do not match to the expectations of this job role. And this is a conversation you're having together. And this is why this particular job role is no longer working. And you can still have the relationship beyond that.
I'd love to know what your answer would have been when you were in Stanford and what your answer would be now, how they would be different. If I were to ask you, Tutti, what is your superpower?
I think for many, many years, and I don't know if this was right at Stanford, because I went into college very, very young. I went into Stanford when I was 16. So there was a lot of maturing that was not there. But I think in like those earlier days, superpower, I would have called drive. Like whatever I wanted to do, like the grit, the grind, I could put in the reps, the hours, and the work to get there. I would have called that the superpower. And some of that still exists within me right now. So the superpower now, I might shift that a little bit. I don't know, probably the closest word that I could bring to it is resilience. So it still has some of that same flavor of it. I think sometimes our core passions and powers never really change, but it's much more along like an elongated view, a long-term perspective of, yeah, stuff's going to happen and kind of know I can weather the storm.
Oh, I love it. What I love most about how you answered that question is that honoring of something that you've had all along. It just has a new flavor to it.
Yeah.
A new perspective. Yeah. So you didn't have to burn the bridges and burn everything and all the strengths and the the superpower that you had all along, but just see it in a different light. Sometimes I think those superpowers seem like such Achilles heels, but they really can still have so much power if we just tweak our perception of them a little bit and see them in a new light, which
Absolutely.
I honor you for doing that. That's so beautiful.
Oh, thank you for that, Tarryn. Now, I believe our superpowers have the brilliance and the glow, and they also have our darkest sides. Both of them are tied up together.
Yeah, and understanding them both allows you to weather that storm. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I could talk to you forever. This is
I like
fascinating.
this.
This is fascinating. I can't wait. I've read some excerpts from your book. I can't wait to just dive in and understand it better. And you have some great stories in there. You have some of your stories from Silicon Valley. You have some stories from different startups. And we'll find your book definitely in the show notes. People can
Yeah.
find Make Space to Lead and find you online as well in the show notes. We have links to find Tutti everywhere. And if you're interested at all in finding out more about her coaching, please check it out. But for those of my audience who are driving right now, unable to look in the show notes, just give us a little heads up of how we can find you online.
Yeah. So you can find the book at makespacetolead.com. And that'll also lead me to all the other places to find me. I'm on Instagram at Tutti, probably Tutti, probably the easiest to remember, but I'm pretty visible. So, and I've got a unique name. So those are all the different ways. My website is tuttitaygerly.com.
Fabulous. Taygerly. Perfect.
Thank you for that, Tarryn.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we close up here today, I'd love to know now in this stage in your life, in this season in your life, Tutti, what is your definition of happiness?
So I think right now for me, especially this year, my definition of happiness is being in the moment. It's having the space, it's that same energy of being able to change your mind, that trust in the moment of knowing, well, being happy is knowing what it is that I need in the moment right now. It could be putting in the hours and the reps to build the business, to, do sales, do what that is. Or it could be sitting on the floor in the sun petting my cat. It's that it's that intuition and trusting in the moment.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been such a pleasure to have you.
Absolutely. Again, super fun.
Yeah, and we did all of that before any of our teenagers woke up. Look at
Win.
that. And then it's a win for me as well. I know, absolutely. Well, thank you. I look forward to seeing what else you have to share with us in the future. And I'm so excited, as I mentioned, to continue to read your book and wishing you a fabulous holiday season.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Taryn, for having me on the show.
Wonderful. And thank you to all of you for listening and for joining us today. I hope you found as much inspiration from Tutti as I have. And please remember, it's when you feel good, that's when you can go out there and do good. Bye-bye.
Bye.